Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. We go back to my passion of slips, trips and falls today with James Abbott, who joins us from Anvil Traction. James is a safety footwear expert. He's been working in the field of industrial safety for many years. And in fact, as he tells us, he's got a passion from his family involved in this area. So we talk a bit about the importance of having an interest and a passion for what you do. But we delve deeply into the topic of safety footwear. And one of the key lessons that I learned from the conversation, which hopefully will come through to you as well, is that as with all of the other areas of chimes, the 6 reasons people slip, there's a lot more depth to this than most people think. And, if you think about why year after year, decade after decade, we have slips, trips and falls being the biggest cause of accident, injury and claim in most sectors, I think that's the key driver. People underestimate the complexity, underestimate the depth, the breadth of knowledge that they need to solve these problems. But we give you a lot of great information when it comes to footwear on that today. We also talk about technology, so what makes a slip-resistant sole, a slip-resistant shoe, what's the difference between a non-slip-resistant shoe and a slip-resistant shoe. We talk about the importance of comfort. We talk a lot about sustainability and the environment as well. James gives us his top tips, and there's also a prize to win as well. So stay tuned to the end. Check out the show notes and you can be in with a chance of winning a prize courtesy of James and Anvil Traction as well. Hope you enjoy the episode. As always, really appreciate follows, likes, comments and all that stuff, and referrals to friends and colleagues. Let's keep on working together, putting out some good content and trying to make the world a safer place. Cheers. Welcome to the podcast, James.
Thanks for having us, Christian. Appreciate it.
I'm loving the background. For those of you watching the video rather than listening in, you'll see a nice selection of shoes on the wall behind James.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to be in the office and actually be able to be in the real world again after the last couple of years.
Yeah. Did you ever watch The Apprentice?
Yes, yeah, a long time ago, but yes.
So Alan Sugar would always say, when they did the video advertisements, he'd always be like, "You've got to get the product shown. You've got to get the product shown." So you're doing that. So well done.
Yeah, you never know when you're going to need to sell something.
Exactly. Well, thanks for joining. We're going to dig into safety as pertains to footwear today, which is obviously very, very relevant to lots of the audience. Do you want to start, because you've been in this field for some time, do you want to start by giving a bit of background to yourself personally, and then perhaps do an introduction to the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the sort of safety PPE market for about 11 years now, pretty much from the start of my career. So I've got a family history in the PPE landscape as well. So my dad's been in the industry for nearly 30 years as well. So and I always thought growing up how boring what he did was, and until I actually went out and started doing it myself. I got some work experience at his firm in Australia, did that for 3 or 4 months, found a passion for it, got back into it back in the UK, and I've been in it ever since. So I started in the trade counter, selling shoes to just members of the public coming in off the street. Yeah. And then worked my way through various sales and customer service roles, and sort of found safety, occupational footwear in particular, at Arco. And I was their technical footwear specialist for just over 2 years. And yeah, been since that point sort of focused in that area really. So been at Skechers prior to my current position, looking after their work footwear division, and now with Anvil Traction. So just got a passion for footwear, been selling it for a long time, and it's nice to find something that you enjoy doing.
Definitely. Having that passion is I mean, I've definitely got that, and I think it's really important because it helps to drive you through the sort of bad days, doesn't it? Because you're into what you're doing. If you're just selling biros or something, I'm sure people are passionate about that, but I would struggle to sort of keep my head down and knuckle down and power through the harder moments in life if I didn't have a passion for what I do.
Yeah, it's cheesy, isn't it? And because you hear it on all the self-help podcasts and books and all of that sort of stuff about having passion for what you do, but when you do find it, it really does ring true, doesn't it? And like you say, it helps you get out of bed in the morning. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I was
going to say, give us the overview of Anvil Traction. So you sort of relatively new there. So tell us about the business and your role and kind of what attracted you to join.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I always had a sort of PPE industrial background, selling into business to business applications, and sort of dabbled in sketches for a couple of years, focusing a bit more on the retail world. Just wanted to understand, I suppose, what that was all about, selling that type of product into there. But found myself wanting to get back into the industrial safety PPE world. I'm not sure that sentence has ever been said before, but it has now. And yeah, Anvil Traction have sort of had a reputation in this industry for some time. So they actually started as a business called Tripal Group, who own Anvil Traction, back in 1995, set up by three friends, hence the name Tripal.
Yeah.
And they had a background in sort of industrial and military footwear. And we started manufacturing footwear in Northamptonshire back in 1995. And much like most brands at the time, discovered that there was commercial benefits to manufacturing product in the Far East, but also everyone was going out there. So we quite quickly developed relationships out in the Far East, and had a selection of customers here in the UK that we make product for. So we actually design, innovate, and develop products for a lot of the distributors and brands in Europe and the UK. Then in 2007, we started on a sort of research project, basically into the world of what we coined traction technology, but as people would know as sort of slip resistance. And the idea of the brand really is creating outsoles, because that's the sort of core fundamental part of making footwear, and the hardest part, for different conditions, surfaces, and environments.
Yeah.
And we now have a business which sells outsoles to brands, which is a more recent thing that we've been doing, but we also have our own selection of safety and occupational footwear, helping to hopefully reduce accidents in the workplace. So the reason I was attracted to the business was because, as we both know, and we'll probably go into more detail on, slips, trips and falls is such a big problem here in the UK. When it comes to footwear, it's so difficult to sort of work your way through the plethora of options available on the marketplace. So having a unique selling point and something you're really good at, especially in an area which is receiving so many accidents and so many fines, and is a great story to sell to your customers, and something you can really get behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lots of accidents, lots of injuries, lots of claims, lots of fines, but also, as you say, lots of options and lots of how can we put this politely, options that aren't perhaps as effective as they pertain to be. So, and that's the same in all aspects of this world. So yeah, we can perhaps dig into that in a bit as well. But
sounds good.
Yeah. So in terms of setting the scene, then obviously footwear is really important, particularly in employee environments where you can control footwear. It's one of the 6 chimes that I talk about a lot. I call it HEAL in chimes because I couldn't get F to work in an acronym. But have you got any good examples or sort of case studies, just to kind of get a bit of context of, where some clients have had some good success by introducing your technology, your traction technology? I like that phrase.
Yeah, there you go. So you'll probably already know, but HEAL's probably more important when it comes to slip resistance as well, because it's about where 70% of the accidents occur off the heel. So you could argue that it's better, Christian, than the
Exactly,
other one.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what we'll go with anyway. But yeah, now in terms of examples, so as we've spoke about before, we sort of focus in those industries with a high slip risk. So you should consider healthcare, hospitality, food manufacturing, facilities management, cruise ship industries. I could go on. Supermarket retail. So that's an area of focus for us. So we've been a supplier to Morrison's supermarkets and Sainsbury's for many years now. So what most people associate with protective or safety footwear is for it to have a toe cap. And obviously that's one element of it. But companies like Sainsbury's, Morrison's, Royal Mail and some other customers of ours specify the footwear simply because they have a high level of slip resistance in the outsole.
Yeah.
So I think it goes without saying, really, you wouldn't be supplying your employees with tens of thousands of pairs of footwear if they weren't helping you to reduce accidents. And I think we've all been in shops where we feel like, oh, potentially we could fall over as a client going into those facilities. So, you know, those same risks apply to the employees that are working in there every day, almost even more so. And I think we've spoken about that, haven't we? Is your business sort of focuses in on all the aspects of slips, but ours really focuses in on accidents at work. And, you know, it's nearly a third of all accidents of work are contributed to a slip, trip and fall. 90+% of those result in a fracture or worse, which obviously is going to affect people's lives. It's going to increase downtime. It's going to affect well-being, mental health, your ability to provide for your family, and, you know, sometimes in a small amount of cases, even the worst case scenario. So again, that's why we're really passionate, and that's why these companies invest in our products to keep people safe. Yeah,
exactly. And footwear is again an area where there can be some misperceptions, as you've alluded to. So people think about safety shoe and they think about ankle protection, toe cap, and a textured sole, but obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that it's slip resistant. So in terms of the sort of technology of this, and that's something you guys are clearly working on, you know, what is it that actually makes a sole slip resistant, and sort of how has that sort of changed over time in terms of people's understanding or the kind of technology that aids that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So traditionally, footwear has been made with a combination of EVA, PU, rubbers, and all those combinations are still used in the marketplace today. But depending on what you're trying to achieve out of the footwear will depend on what combination of materials you use. So the first component of an effective slip-resistant pair of footwear is having the correct compound in the sole of the footwear. So when we did our sort of second research project starting in 2015, a collaboration, should I say, with Sheffield University, that was what our main focus was on the compound of the footwear. And it's arguable that has the greatest effect on the slip resistance of the footwear. After that comes obviously essentially liquids, and trying to disperse the liquids as fast as possible, surface area coverage and patterns on the soles of the footwear. But it's not quite as simple as that. Depending on what surface you're using, what contaminants that you're dealing with as a company, is going to mean that you're going to require different elements of the footwear to do different things. So there's also risks of contaminants on the floor, or, you know, it might be big bits of food. It could be things that could clog the footwear. So you've got to have different outsoles that achieve different outcomes, basically.
Yeah, quite right. I mean, if you think about, let's say, someone like a Cardo, for example, you know, you couldn't, as a Cardo, specify one shoe for your whole workforce, because some of them are in chillers, some of them are in warehouses, whereas others are delivering off the backs of vans and walking on grass and up and down step, you know, and actually there's all these different requirements, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is general standards for testing slip resistance in the marketplace. So, a pair of footwear is given an SRA, SRB, or SRC marking, and it's got to achieve a minimum coefficient of friction with various conditions and various surfaces. And that's what we would consider the best guide at the moment in terms of selection of footwear. However, you can commission businesses to do specific slip testing on your behalf. So you might take a sample of your flooring and a sample of the contaminants that you're using on your day-to-day and test various different parts of footwear. However, the biggest challenge for companies, I find, is, like I said earlier in the conversation, is getting through that plethora of options that is available. And that's what that SRA, SRB testing can give you. It's a score from 0 to 1, pretty much, although it can go above that, which is going to tell you what the coefficient of friction of that footwear is. And that information is not necessarily as readily available as you might like it to be, or as the general public or decision makers might like it to be. However, it is always available. So we always encourage people to ask for it, especially if you are in a high slip risk environment, because that's going to give you a really good starting position when trying to select the right footwear for your applications and environment. And fundamentally, eventually, your outcome is to try and test those products in your environment, because that's when you're going to get a true reflection as to whether it's going to work or not. Because you can do lab testing all day, doesn't mean it's going to work in the real life environment, unfortunately.
Because there's always individual elements that you don't expect and can't replicate in a lab, I suppose.
Absolutely. So,
and so you mentioned there's quite a lot of research going on in your business. I mean, is that around all of those elements of what makes up a safe sole, or is it looking at the compounds in particular, or without giving away too many trade secrets?
Yeah, no, there are things that we don't talk about publicly, but the 3 elements that I discussed are the main sort of things that you would focus on. They sound simple, but they take a hell of a long amount of time to get right. We obviously also focus on other elements of the footwear. It's all right having a slip-resistant pair of shoes, but you also need to focus on the comfort. You also need to focus on the wearability, the durability. And there's all sorts of, if you have a softer compound, potentially it's not going to last as long. So you've got to prioritize as an end user and as a manufacturer when developing the footwear for the right environment. So if we were developing an outsole for a construction environment, for example, we're going to be focusing in on the mud or contaminant not sticking to the sole of the footwear and not clogging, while still keeping an element of slip resistance, but it's not going to be top of the priority list. Whereas if we're looking in a healthcare setting or a hospitality setting, back of house in a kitchen or whatever you might see, we're going to be looking at oils and greases and tiles, and not necessarily as focused on the contaminants that are going to be present. So again, it's different also for different courses. But all of those elements collaboratively obviously are going to create the best pair of footwear for that individual. Comfort's quite interesting because it has so many, it's a multivariate equation. There's like 20 different elements, whether that be weight, suppleness of the upper, breathability, or temperature control, as you might call it, insoles, cushioning, so you've got to try and encompass all of those different things. So just to give you a couple of examples, from a comfort perspective, fitting is really, really important, but it's also one of the hardest things to get right. So you and me and everyone else will have bought footwear from different brands, and it'll fit differently. So you get a size 8 in one brand, a size 8 in the other, and you're like, why does one fit me tight and one fit me loose? And and there's all sorts of different reasons for that. So that can be the last fitting, it can be the type of lacing mechanism or tightening of the shoe mechanism, could be the upper, could be if it's a high heel shoe versus a flat shoe. So we've actually developed an app to help measure an individual's foot versus a specific style of footwear. So that's a project that we've worked on. We've also got an insole project are happening in the background as well. So there's a lot of research that we've done again with our friends at Sheffield University around the insole needs to touch the bottom of the foot as much as possible. So then you start getting into arch support, low, medium, high. You start getting into cushioning under the foot, in the forefront of the foot, in the back of the foot. What kind of support do you need to ensure that the foot's staying in its anatomically correct position throughout the life of the wearer? So yeah, we're trying to do, or we are doing work in all of these different areas to help bring together a full proposal of a plethora of products for the end user. And yeah, like I said, our most recent stuff has actually been collaborating with brands. So we're Anvil Traction, we sell certain types of footwear into certain industries, but again, we're all about trying to get high slip resistant or high footwear with the correct traction technology onto people's feet. So it might be that we're not experts in making specific types of footwear at specific price points. So, that's where we're looking to collaborate with brands to essentially get that technology out to more people.
Yeah. And I love that breakdown you gave, actually, because it really illustrates a point that I try to hammer home all the time, which is that this topic is often perceived as being something that's quite simple and straightforward, but actually there's huge amounts of depth to getting this right. And you've just spoken about 7 or 8 factors that all require a depth of thinking to ensure that the shoes are A, effective, but B, really importantly, actually worn, because there's no point specifying and buying some shoes if the members of staff decide not to wear them, just as there's no point investing in a floor cleaning machine that will clean the floor really well if they don't want to use it and it just sits in the cupboard, or and there's all sorts of other examples. So yeah, really, really important to drill down into the detail and try and ensure that these things are done right.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, just testament to that. I mean, these are the shoes that you wear the vast majority of your life. If you work 9 to 5, that's 8 hours. That's a third of your day. If you spend another 8 hours sleeping, and how long are you wearing your other shoes for during the day? These are really, really important part of your life. They're going to affect your health going forward. They're going to help reduce musculoskeletal issues. Lots of different things. And it's our job really to try and not get too technical, but to sort of simplify that and help customers, individuals, and distributors, whoever that might be, make the right decision.
I was just thinking as you were talking about partnerships, what we should do? Let's pick this up offline, but did you see, you must have done over the summer that all the tennis players were slipping over at Wimbledon?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I got quoted on the BBC about this because I put something on LinkedIn and they must have found it somehow and picked it up. And there's got to be something that we could do, there to try to reduce that risk of slipping on grass tennis courts. I thought that must be a fun project. So let's pick that one up offline.
Sounds good. We're always up for a challenge, and that certainly sounds like one.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. And in terms of sort of moving forward then, I mean, do you think that we have reached a point where we kind of know, we're sort of almost there in terms of what we can do with all of that technology, or do you think there's still leaps and bounds we can make to move things further forward?
No, there's definitely always more we can do. Slip resistance will only, we're always trying to push the boundaries of slip resistance, what we can achieve. You've got to be careful. There is something called stiction, and you can run the risk of people tripping over as a result of the footwear you're providing, as opposed to reducing the likelihood of an injury. We saw that a lot with social distancing signs during the pandemic. So what we tended to find was either people would put in sort of smooth as a baby's bum signs, which would be slippery, or they put in these kind of super grippy distancing signs that would produce a trip hazard. So yeah, that's exactly the same as footwear, as you say. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that I see footwear innovating is we want to see people wearing the best footwear they can be. So I'm a big advocate for businesses spending as much as they can afford on people's feet, because like I said, they're wearing them for a large proportion of the day. And the areas that we have a sort of mantra that we go by, which is safer, greener, happier. So we're always trying to make our product safer. We're always, and the happier element is that sort of aesthetic element to it, the comfort element to it, which all brands in the world are trying to get right. The people keep it a challenge because everyone's different, but you can do your best and try and make footwear more adaptable. So I think that's somewhere the market's going. I think adaptability of footwear, personalization of footwear is definitely going to be a thing as well. And just to focus on that greener element, that recycling and that reducing consumption of certain materials and optimizing the use of sustainable materials is where the market's going to be going. And with that will always come more innovation, you know. So that's where we see it going, and that's where we're going to be focusing most of our new product development in. How fast it will get there is a different conversation, but we think it's the right thing to do, and we see eventually the end goal being, you know, everyone wearing footwear which has been sustainably sourced or using sustainable materials of some sort, especially as the money is invested from those higher end industries like sofa making, car making, fashion footwear. You know, they'll drive, I think, the narrative and bring the cost down on those types of things going forwards.
Yeah, and hopefully people wearing safer soles as well, because that would, you know, whilst you can't as an employer control what your customers are wearing on their feet, obviously if we can encourage people to make sort of more sensible choices on soles, you know, generally, then that will have an effect on those customer.
We just say it's about doing your due diligence, you know. So again, those coefficient of friction ratings, it's also picking the right supplier. So, you know, picking suppliers that are registered, whether that's BSIF or they've got the right accreditations, EN ISO 14001, 9001, all of that sort of good stuff as well. All these factors contribute to more likely making the correct decision for your wearers. You know, so we try to encourage people to just think about those things as much as possible, and then you're more likely to get a better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back to the kind of sustainability, environmental piece that you touched on. Obviously, that's a really hot topic at the moment, and I think you're quite right that that's the way things are going to have to go. I don't know the answer to this. I'm interested to hear. I would have thought that the three key drivers would be A, what you're actually using the materials to produce the shoes. Secondly, can you make them more durable and longer lasting so they're not having to be replaced as frequently? And then third, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, is there any way of making these shoes kind of almost recyclable? Because I see one of the big issues with say fast food restaurants or hotels is they have a huge turnover of staff, and if they're buying footwear for people and then they leave after 3 months, you know, is there something we could do with that footwear to reuse it in some way and not produce kind of landfill issues?
Yeah, so I'll provide this caveat before answering this question. We're still in the infancy of this journey, but we do know a little bit about it because we've been doing a lot of work on it behind the scenes. So we use what we call the waste hierarchy. So I'd encourage anyone to look that up. And so you're starting with sort of product elimination. So you're trying not to use the materials in the first place, ideally. And that works its way all the way down to sort of disposal of the product. And along that way, you're then starting to find reuse purposes and different things. So when we look at a product, we're looking at the box, we're looking at the packaging, we're looking at the labeling, we're looking at the materials that we use in the product. So there's now availability of sustainable materials. So that's governed by what we call GRS, so Global Recycling Standard, which essentially means that the component that you're using will have at least 20% recycled materials in it. And that can go obviously upwards up to 100%. So we can do that now with sort of knitted uppers, laces, webbing, insole boards, you know, lots of different factors. It's also starting now to get into outsoles as well. So you'll see retail brands like Allbirds and Veja using sort of sugarcane EVA, you know, in their footwear. You know, you'll see brands using recycled polyurethane in their footwear as well. So for us, the difficulty is trying to get the balance between that slip resistant element and getting that right as well. So that's why safe is first, you know, because we're trying to keep people safe first, but we're also trying to, you know, do what we can as well to keep things green. From a durability perspective, you're absolutely right. Try and make the product as durable as possible. Again, always keeping that safer element in mind. So that might be, you know, upper, you know, that's one thing we really focus on in our outsoles, which is a real differentiator for us. We do have really high slip results, but we also have a really good abrasion resistance of the outsole as well. So that's really, really important. And the recycling element is probably the most difficult one. So so we recycle tons and tons and tons, or we don't recycle tons and tons and tons of footwear in the UK, not just us, everyone, major retail brands. So it's something that we're looking at quite heavily at the moment. The biggest challenge with industrial occupational safety footwear is obviously contamination. So, you know, if it's got oil or it's got chemicals on it or whatever that might be, it's about getting it clean and being able to take it apart so that you can recycle it. So, you know, a trainer from a Nike or whatever you want is going to have a knitted upper or maybe an EVA outsole, maybe a maximum 4 or 5 different components, whereas a safety footwear is going to could have an aluminium, composite, steel, toe cap in it. It can have a lot of different elements. So with that being said, we are just starting a partnership with a company in the UK that can recycle whole footwear. So the idea being that it would sort of break down the entire unit of footwear, and then that would be reused into things like carpet underlay, flooring, wiring, equestrian flooring. There's some real random uses for it out there, and at worst creating refuse derived fuel or pellets for it to be burnt, essentially. The idea being it's not going to landfill. So there are some solutions. The biggest challenge actually we're finding is getting people to send it back. So that's the biggest challenge we're finding at the moment. So we're doing a bunch of trials with sort of key customers to try and understand how that model's working. But this is very much in its infancy for all brands really in our industry. So anyone wants to reach out and have that discussion with us, you know, we're more than open to any ideas or any suggestions or any partnerships that people are interested in.
Couple of thoughts on that actually. Another interview I did was with Gary Fage, and he's really into sustainable cleaning products, and so he's working with a sort of supply chain system whereby literally every single bottle of chemical gets recycled and it gets taken on canals in London, and you know, so it's very, very clever sort of end-to-end system. So that's an example that might be worth having a look at. Not that it would work the same way for you, but just to learn the lessons from
absolutely.
And the other thing, it's interesting you say about the biggest challenge is getting people to actually send them back, and it's this age-old adage, isn't it, of, you know, you're standing there in front of an audience. I've seen lots of cartoons depicting this over the years, you know, who wants change, and everyone puts their hand up. Who wants to change, and it's like crickets, and everyone's like, you're looking around and not wanting to step forward. So there's a lot of talk about, you know, we've got to do more about this, that, and the other thing, and the environment, and but actually getting people to talk, to walk the walk, I suppose, rather than talk the talk is the big thing to overcome.
Because the reality is that's a cost to someone, you know. So that's our decision going forwards. Do we put that cost into the product? Do we ask people to pay for it? Do we take on the cost? It's a slightly different business model for us because we're not a business to consumer business. So we can't offer people a voucher, for example, to send the footwear back to us. So, you know, we have to come up with some more innovative solutions to try and make that happen. I think we'll get there. Because like I say, we've only really been focused on it for the last sort of 6 months properly. So solutions will get better. And I mean, fundamentally, it's probably going to be, it's got to have to be incentivized in some way, whether governmentally or whatever, to really sort of kick it into gear and make that real change in the market. Because the reality is industrial footwear is not the biggest problem. You know, it's probably retail footwear.
No, it isn't. But I suppose the the industrial footwear is a sector that is more easily controllable, isn't it? So whereas getting people to actually, I'm trying to think what I've done when I've had an old pair of shoes. I tried to give them to charity, but I'm trying to think what I would have done if I didn't do that.
It's a good point. That's a good point. If so, what a lot of brands or in our industry will do is, if the footwear is in reusable condition, might send it away to a local charity or a third world country or whatever that might be, for it to be reused as well. So, but normally what you find is pretty messed up.
Yeah, exactly. My footwear versus a chef's footwear are going to have very different needs and requirements, and have a different level of hammering, aren't they, over the years?
Absolutely. But it's all, like I say, it's the right thing to do. It's a focus of our business, and we will be pursuing it, however difficult it is. So
no, good to hear, and it's something we all need to think about and learn from what you're doing, and Gary, that I mentioned, and others. So good for you guys. So drawing things to a bit of a close, James, you've probably covered a lot of this already, but I think it'd be a good idea just to maybe give a few kind of key top tips in terms of what should people be doing in this area, how should they be selecting, that kind of thing. Just a few sort of bullet points, which I know you would have covered most of them already, but if you want to sort of succinctly put it across in that way, I think that'd be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, more than happy to. So obviously, we're focusing on slip resistance, traction technology. So what we're saying to people is, firstly, find the right supplier. So someone that's BSIF registered, got the right accreditations. You can be confident that they're supplying the companies with the right type of footwear that's going to protect your wearers. The last thing you want is to provide what you think is slip resistant footwear that's not certified, and it's not going to protect you if there's ever an incident, whether legally or otherwise. The second part of that is look into what their slip scores are. So how well have they performed, and on what types of surfaces? Also think about whether that's relevant to what you're supplying them for. And if it isn't, you need to consider the possibility that you need to look at further testing. That further testing could either be in laboratory conditions, or, and probably you could argue more preferably, just on the feet of your wearers, and understanding and getting that feedback and recording that feedback and listening to what they have to say before providing them. Spend as much as you can on your employees' feet. If you look after them, they'll look after you, that old adage. And they'll be happier. And there's all sorts of information out there about how that can increase productivity and lots of different factors as well. And I think that would be my top tips.
Yeah, that last point as well is really worth hammering home, because it's not just about, we're here talking about slips and trips and safety, yes, and that's important, of course, but it's all these other things that you mentioned about health and well-being and musculoskeletal and even there's an argument around mental health, because if you're uncomfortable and it's going to drag you down and so on and so forth. So it's definitely worth investing the appropriate amount into this, I would say.
Completely agree. Like I say, we there is an order, but you're going to have different priorities at different businesses, and that's why we focus in the areas we do. But we acknowledge that it's really important to get that last point right, because if we don't, then it doesn't really matter what we do with the outsole, because no one's going to want to wear it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, last couple of bits then, James. How can people find out more? How can people contact you? What's the website? What's the social media? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is anviltraction.global. We can also be found on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook by searching Anvil Traction. You can find me, James Abbott, on our Anvil Traction website. You've got all the email addresses and contact information that's required. And yeah, look, if anyone's got anything, even just questions, or they need some advice or whatever it might be, please feel free to reach out, because we're always happy to help. We're not in the business of recommending people our products if they're not going to work, because we're in it for the long haul, not the not the short-term gains. So always happy to help where we can, especially if someone's trying to help their employees and reduce accidents at work.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we started, we threw an idea out there about, is there any sort of prize or something we could do, a prize draw, and you said, oh, maybe a free pair of shoes. So I don't know how we can do that, but if you're happy to do that, then I'll have a think, and when I publish the podcast, I'll include some details in the show notes. So if you're up for doing that, then and you're interested in getting a free pair of shoes, then have a look in the show notes and we'll figure out a way of entering you in a prize draw to win a free pair.
More than happy to.
Perfect. All right, James. Well, listen, I really appreciate that. Great episode. I think covered lots of important and salient points, and actually put across the depth and the breadth of this issue and why you need to look at it properly, and some of the holistic themes around it as well. So thanks very much.
No, really appreciate your time. Thanks for having us, and look forward to potentially, hopefully, future conversations.
Definitely. And thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you again next week with another episode of the Safety and Risk Success podcast. Cheers.